conservative or liberative, they become a judge and they view whatever case is presented in front of them through the Constitution. And I don't think that's what's happening. I think this nomination was the way it's rushed. It puts a lot of senators, Republican senators, in trouble this election cycle. The American people have said, and time again in polls, that we would like to wait. I just think that's fair. I'm not opposed to Judge Barrett. I think she has the credentials to be on the court. It's just the timing. The timing is not right. If President Trump was to win and that was his nominee, then that would be okay. But the timing, he says, oh, I need 9 justices on the court for this election case that's likely to be heard, or I need 9 justices for the Affordable Care Act case that's going to be heard. You're politicizing the Supreme Court, and it's not right. So that's why I think there should be an amendment for sure that says a president cannot nominate a vacant Supreme Court seat in his year. Thank you.
So, this is interesting because I think what's not being discussed, and Corey, you mentioned it, is that, there has to be and Neftali, like you said, there has to be consistency. If we were going to abide by the election rule on the Democratic side, they have to acknowledge that Obama did not have a right to choose Merrick Garland. Now, I disagree personally. I think it's a solid argument, though.
Can I say I agree? I think I think Merrick Garland should have had a hearing, right? And I think they should have followed the rule this time too, though, and said Amy Coney Barrett should have a hearing too. I think a president has the right to choose in an election year. Until you're not president, I think you have that right. And so I want to say and make clear, I don't think President Obama should have had his nominee full stop denied a seat. I don't think that. And I don't think that was hypocrisy. But I think it's an acknowledgement on both sides. If we're going to say it's wrong to elect or make a nomination in the election year, let's say that for everybody. I just wanted to put that little asterisk.
Yeah, no.
I mean, can I say something?
Go ahead.
I mean, to that point, President Obama, he had 10 months. There's maybe 1.5 here. I mean, people have already voted by mail. I mean, I voted. There's votes being submitted currently. So I don't think the situation's parallel at all.
I agree with you, Noah. But as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, the president is president for 4 years. He's not president for 4 years minus the 5 days of the election, And I think I agree with you. Absolutely. They're different situations. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge that. But I think when it comes to consistency, we can't have a rule that says 1 month from the election or 3 days from the election, we're not going to do it. It should be you're president for 4 years. And when you're not president anymore, that's when your power stops. And so there are differences, but as all of us legal jurisprudence appreciators can understand, a rule has to be clear. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at is let's have a clear rule and let's give the president their power and let's stop making the judiciary political because I think it feels dirty. I think we can all agree it feels really dirty when that happens.
So I want to ask about, the whole situation with the court packing, because the media seems to have found an Achilles heel in the Biden campaign with that. It seems because Biden and Harris haven't not articulated a solid view yet. Now, if it were me and I was in the Biden camp, I would say, if I was in the Biden campaign, I would say, look, this is not something that the president decides. Congress gets to vote and decide and deliberate as it pertains to the amount of justices on the Supreme Court. This is not an executive branch, decision. Now, as the executive, I can go ahead and put forward the idea or the initiative, but it's up to Congress. And that's why you need to ask your senators, those who are running for Senate, those who are running for the House of Representatives, you need to ask them where they stand as it pertains to this matter. I want to get your thoughts as to how you think they can handle this situation, this question on whether or not they're in favor of court packing. I was very upset, and I think me and a lot of people across the country who identify as Democrats, when during the vice presidential debate, Mike Pence was asked about health care. And instead he transitions and pivots to packing the court. And he did it in an artful way. I have to admit, he was very smooth. And Harris fell right into his trap. You know, I think Harris should have said, well, why don't you answer Susan Page's question as it pertains to healthcare? And the reason why you don't want to answer is X, Y, Z. What you fill in the blank. How do you all feel? Feel free to jump in on the issue of whether you or how the Biden campaign should address the issue of court packing.
I guess I'll start. I know during the last town hall, Biden kind of got grilled about the court packing situation just a little bit. And I thought he kind of alluded to the point that he would participate in that, which I think he should steer clear of that. Like you said, I think he should kind of off-put that question, say, hey, I'm running as an executive. This is for the legislative parties to figure out. That's just something I'm not willing to discuss right now. If I say this, that's going to be a headline. If I say this, it's going to be another headline. So I think it's just something he should move on from and not ponder on.
Yeah, I was going to say this. Similar to what Noah's saying, because we're trying to say that it's important for us not, or the president not to politicize the judiciary. And so I think that it's a strategy that they're using not to talk about court packing, but they're not doing it in a way that gives the American people any ideas of where they're headed. And so I think that's the issue, not necessarily not saying anything, but I think it's just not responding at all towards like, okay, well, maybe it's up to Congress. Congress can decide, and the senators, and just leave it at that. But not saying anything, I think, leaves too much room for interpretation. And I think that's the problem here, because it's like, okay, so are you planning on court packing? Are you not? There's too many questions here. And I think that's the biggest issue. That's the biggest fallacy in this conversation, them not addressing it. And if you are going to address it, just shed a little bit of light and move forward.
And I think, to your point, Neftali, I think we're in an era with the media where if you give an answer, no matter how outrageous it may be, it still is better, like you said, than not giving an answer. Because when you don't give an answer, it's kind of like they smell blood, and they're going to be hounding you in the next interview. You can go to 60 Minutes, you can go to ABC, you can go to Morning Joe, and they will still ask you this question because it seemed like you didn't address it in the beginning, and everyone's going to feel like I'm going to be the reporter. I'm going to be the one to pull it out of them. And just to kind of portray why I think that's to be the case is because, look at Trump and his taxes. Trump has offered exactly, he's offered answers as to why it was reported that he paid $750 in taxes. But those answers, whether or not you believe that they're ludicrous, constituted some kind of answer. And as a result, you don't have every reporter hounding him down about this. Now it's brought up by the Democrats who are running for president, vice president, former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris. But you're not seeing reporters constantly hound them the way you're seeing them hound the Biden team as it relates to court packing. Edward, your thoughts?
No, I mean, recently, I think Biden gonna come out with an interview on 60 Minutes, ironically, this coming Sunday about this issue, about what is his plan to do. I think the strategy when I was reading, it mentioned that he would convene a national study about the court system itself and see what's been working and not working the past 100+ years of the court. Once again, I mean, that's an answer, and that's what, I guess the American people and the judiciary wants. Like, regardless of your answer is right, wrong, ludicrous, give us an answer so we don't hound you about it, because not giving an answer at all will deem more headlines, more tweets, more hashtags. And, unfortunately, the Supreme Court nomination process is the hot topic right now and will be for the next 3 weeks. And so that the camp, Biden and Harris camp, need to say something about it. So hopefully on Sunday, during the 60-minute interview with Biden, he will address more about it, about his exact response to packing the court. And after that, he should move on. Because like I said, he's just an executive. He's not the president yet. He's not elected yet. That shouldn't be his main focus. But he needs to address it and move on to other things that will hopefully get him the nomination to become the president. So No, it's tough. It's tough because, like you said, no matter, those debates, even debate tonight is going to start in, less than 30 minutes. It's going to be interesting to see what's going on and what other things are going to say about it. So we'll see.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I don't think that kind of giving the media attention to the Congress as it pertains to this issue is dodging the question. I think when you're running for president and vice president, you can't afford to get yourself wrapped up into unnecessary positions when you really at the end of the day, the constitutional responsibility is up to the legislature. Why get yourself involved? Why ruin or stain any kind of chance you have at winning folks in the middle when you don't have to? That's just politics to me, and I know a lot of folks are like, I want to see where you stand, and that's a legitimate concern. We need to see where they stand, but I think as it pertains to issues like this is a drastic thing. I think this is right up there with abolishing the Electoral College. This should be left. I mean, if you don't have to get involved with this, I don't think you should voluntarily throw yourself in the mix, because no matter what, you're going to end up with some kind of negative press at the other side, and it could cost you. Justine, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I was really just going to echo what everybody else has been saying. I definitely feel like they should give some sort of answer, but definitely not something that's so definite in terms of a yes or no. I think that maybe an explanation, like maybe what we might get on Sunday in terms of like the thought process behind it would be really great. And it would give people an idea that it's at least a concern, but not anything that it would be so definite that the media could run with it and completely taint the campaign. I think in a lot of ways, what the big fear is that, when we talk about hypocrisy in terms of, the nomination of Judge Amy Barrett, also with packing the court, what precedent would that send? And so what would happen in future elections? What would happen with future presidents? Would we have a Supreme Court of like 20 people or 21 people? So I think that it's really important that that there is an answer that's given that's very suitable and reasonable, but that we're also kind of steering clear of like creating any crazy headlines that might really go south for them.
And before we pivot from this topic, if I were in the campaign of the Biden and Harris team, I would say we're not packing the court. They're packing the court. They're putting federal judges from the DC court, from the Court of Appeals level, the district court level, all the way up. They're packing the court. I mean, you have to turn it around, and I think the Republicans do a masterful job, more so than the Democrats, at reversing the narrative, and turning things back on its head. But I want to turn to COVID-19 relief bill negotiations, because it seems like this whole year we have seen ebbs and flows as it pertains to this negotiation process. Of course, we started off this, I think this second or third quarter of 2020 with House Democrats putting forward a $2.2 trillion plan that was intended to also include unemployment relief, stimulus checks, funding for those who are laid off because of COVID-19, funding for schools who have to transition to this period of online, and the difficulties behind having an education and having a learning environment that still is up to par. I think, as it pertains to what the House put forward and what Secretary Steve Mnuchin put forward with what was called the GOP skinny bill, with $1 trillion. And, at first it seemed as if, because I heard Senator Chuck Schumer say, we've been in negotiations. We go up $1 trillion, they go down $1 trillion, and eventually we'll meet in the middle. And this was in September and August. Now we're in October, late October, and we're still in the situation where it seems to be in limbo. Do you think that, the fact that we're still in this situation where it doesn't look like a COVID-19 relief package is on the horizon before November 3rd, will that have any implications? And before I throw the question out to the panel, Senate Democrats blocked a $500 billion GOP coronavirus bill as House Speaker Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin continue to be talking towards a comprehensive deal. Are we in a situation where it's inevitable that whatever happens will happen after November 3rd? Edward?
No, I think so. like I said, the priority right now is the Supreme Court nomination. That's a priority right now, unfortunately. It should be the COVID-19 second stimulus package that's been talked for months now. But it's not. It's not. It's literally the Supreme Court nomination, and then somehow, some way, the COVID-19 package still got the back seat, and now that's like the secondary headlines of after the main headline, and so it's looking like it's going to be probably early January, early March, where hopefully talks are not renegotiated. Hopefully, it's some talks that'll be finalized at that time, but I think it's very, very not likely that a deal will get done and negotiated before November 3rd at this time. So.
And another thing that's important in this whole negotiating process is that both sides point fingers at the other, and they're saying, for instance, the Democrats are saying, well, everything in the Republicans' proposal is not pertaining to the issue of addressing the economic fallout that COVID-19 has caused. And the Republicans are pointing to the Democrats saying everything that you have in your bill is not addressing what the pandemic has caused in terms of economic turmoil. The Democrats pointed to specific line items. I think that was a specific building that funding was going to be allocated towards, and the idea was that this building would generate revenue for one of Trump's properties, the Trump Hotel in DC, because it's in close proximity to this new proposed building that is under the Republicans' skinny bill plan. That's just an example of the back and forth that we're seeing right now. And Neftali, I want to get your thoughts on whether you think the fact that we're in this stalemate that seems to be going on way beyond, that's going to be going on way after November 3rd. Will this hurt Democrats' chances, or will this hurt the Republicans more if we don't have a bill by that time?
Right. I love this question because there's so many dimensions to this question. I think currently the United States, we're battling two pandemics. It's not just one, it's two. It's the COVID-19 pandemic and it's the racial inequality pandemic. And both have been politicized. And I think that's the issue that we're having now. I think that the Republican Party right now is the party that's in power. And so, yes, the Democrats are, both parties are pointing fingers, but right now we have a president that's a Republican president. And there has been no relief to the American people besides one stimulus check that not all Americans received. I mean, when you look and you compare other countries and you see how other countries have taken responsibility and seen this issue as a human rights issue, we here in America have politicized COVID-19. And so I think that will have more negative impact on the Republican Party because they're the sitting party. And there has nothing done other than that one stimulus check. Again, we're battling two pandemics right now, and both pandemics have been politicized. Instead of it being a human rights issue, it's turned into something that sits in the House of politics. And so I think that there's going to be a negative implications for the Republican Party. I really do believe that.
This is interesting because the one thing that seems to be tangible that people can understand as a result, as it pertains to this COVID-19 package, whenever it comes, is that it should have some kind of unemployment benefit. Earlier this year, folks received $600 unemployment benefits, but Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in July of this year expressed opposition for an extension of the $600 unemployment benefit. In the next relief package, Senator John Cornyn of Texas, who's in a very hotly contested race against MJ Hagar, a veteran, said we should never pay people not to work. We should try to help people to get back to work. Is this messaging of not providing an incentive for people to not work tone deaf in this age where folks are just looking for some kind of relief? I think that messaging kind of reminds me of Mitt Romney in 2012, the traditional Republicans who are advocating for being able to stand on your own 2 feet, get just enough aid from the government to be sufficient to go ahead and provide for your own and be a productive member of society. Justine, do you think this is a tone deaf approach as we're in the heat of this pandemic?
Absolutely. I feel as though I remember earlier this year where that became a conversation over the summer about the employment and money that people were receiving in terms of, COVID-19. And I think really what the sad shame is that there are many people who chose to receive unemployment benefits because the jobs that they had were not paying them as much money as they were receiving on the money that they were getting from the government. And so the fact that they could actually better provide for their families with the money they were receiving versus what they were getting at their jobs. So I think that actually puts forth a different conversation in terms of equality in America and what we're paying, what our minimum wage is across the board, what citizens in blue collar jobs or, certain jobs are being paid. So I think it's incredibly tone deaf and it completely misses the mark. It also takes the conversation away from many families who don't even have the choice of going to work right now, where, if they don't receive the money they need, they can't pay for, groceries for their children, or they can't take care of their families. They can't, take care of their basic necessities. And I think that, when we make it about that one polar, minute issue, it really takes it away from what's most important. And also really puts the wrong buzzwords out where people get the wrong ideas and sometimes will hold true to what may be true only for a minority of people.
So, go ahead. My bad.
No, just add to that, Mike. I think it's incredibly tone deaf as well. I mean, look at the definition of employment. To calculate the unemployment rate, it means I'm looking for a job. I just don't have one yet. And so to say that because I don't have a job, I shouldn't get paid, well, I'm unemployed because I'm looking for one. And for somehow, some way, I'm not obtaining that position that I'm looking for due to various issues. And so it's just interesting to show that even what Justine just talking about, that the minimum wage in America for a week is less than $600. And so the fact that employees and different people in that position that they decide to receive unemployment benefits over their job, it creates a whole new other issues, like Justine was talking about, that I took this money because there's more money that I make while working 40 hours a week. So what does that say already about the American economy, society, education, what have you? And so for the most part, I think people don't mind working. I mean, of course, everybody wants not to work until, they're 65 and, live house on the beach. But at the same time, there got to be some flexibility of working. It's like, hey, I've worked. I want to get paid for the work I earn. And, we can talk about minimum wage and how that amount is, nobody can survive by yourself, no matter having a partner and a family with a minimum wage balance. I mean, minimum wage really is for probably, low high school students who don't really have responsibility like that. And so it's just sad to see that now the unemployment is another political issue, showing how if I don't have a job because I want to get free money from not having a job, now it depends on who I'm going to vote for. So it's just very misleading in that sense. That's how I talk about it. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mike.
No. I like the points you raised. But if we're going to get a little bit deeper into the weeds of this bill or proposed bill that's on the horizon, seemingly after November 3rd, Senator Chuck Schumer went to he addressed the cast of Morning Joe on September 10th, and he said, pertaining to the upcoming COVID relief bill, this isn't a skinny bill; it's emancipated. It's emaciated. And if you had any doubts about McConnell's intentions, he put 2 poison pills in the bill: the DeVos education proposal, which takes money out of public schools and puts it into private and religious schools, and his liability provisions, which are so broad that it would make it hard to even file medical malpractice suits unrelated to COVID-19 until 2024. But at the same time, Speaker Pelosi has been under fire because the argument on the flip side was that, well, isn't a bill better than no bill? Should you be willing to just bite the bullet, go ahead and pass a bill that may have 2 poison pills in it for the sake of allowing the American people to experience some kind of relief? Is this fair criticism? And with that being said, are House Democrats shooting themselves in the foot, and Senate Democrats, by not going ahead and getting through any kind of measure just to ensure that the American people, as we're entering I think we're already in the final quarter of the year, and it seems like we're in a second wave because there's been an increase in cases and deaths rapidly across the country. Do you think that the fact that you're taking a strong stand on your side of the trench and not jumping to the other side or in the middle would actually hurt Democrats' chances? Noah?
I don't think so at this point. I think not passing a COVID-19 relief bill, it works politically for both sides of the aisle. For the Republicans, obviously, they're saying, hey, we have proposition after proposition. It's not getting passed. Obviously, you mentioned the poisonous pills in the bill, which is why Democrats are not wanting this. It is a skinny bill. Like, it's not going to help out as much as the first stimulus may have, and it's taken resources away from where they should go and putting them in private places. So I don't think it'll necessarily hurt Democrats. I think people who typically vote Democrat, they see what's happening here, and the Republicans, they see too. I just think, honestly, right now it works politically for both parties, so it's not going to hurt anybody, really.
Corey,
That's my
your thoughts
on it.
I don't think it's going to hurt Democrats. I think, if anything, they are going to get big points, especially with their voter base. And I think even with moderates, you have to stand for something, and they're advocating for what they believe. And I think, to their credit, they're doing it well, and they are putting the narrative in the right light. But I think it's not just a narrative at this point. I mean, COVID-19 has uncontrovertibly hurt women more than any other pandemic, because women are being held accountable to stay in the home and help educate the children who are not able to go to school. Many women have had to leave their jobs and not take a paycheck just to make sure that their children are taken care of, because their children can't go to daycare, they can't go to school, they don't have that opportunity. And I think it makes Republicans even more so look like the party that don't care about what happens, right? They say they're the pro-life party, and in many ways they are the pro-life party, but then when it actually comes to taking care of children or taking care of families, when there is a pandemic like this, they're not willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is. And so I think that is what's frustrating, especially for people like me that might associate more with conservative values, but wants to see a stimulus relief to help women and to help families and to help education. And seeing Senate Republicans who are so unwilling to just kind of meet in the middle. I think that should be the party that's probably more willing to meet in the middle right now, because, as Edward astutely pointed out, their focus right now is the confirmation hearing of Amy Coney Barrett, when really they were elected to serve the American people, not to serve the sitting president. And I think that is a point that's getting lost in the political narrative right now. As senators, you were elected to serve us, not to serve
So I want to transition
a
a little bit, if we can, to President Trump seeming to be at odds with the head of the CDC, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, this to me was in the works since I started seeing the first press briefings on COVID-19. There seemed to be a dance between the two of them. Of course, Dr. Anthony Fauci is not a political figure, and I think he tried his best to ensure that he was above the fray of politics. But being in the orbit in the Trump White House, I think it's a very hard thing to do, being that even masks were politicized. I mean, the act of wearing masks. But President Trump seems to be, in my view, campaigning against Dr. Fauci now. And it seems like the gloves are off at this point, because he had a campaign ad that featured Dr. Fauci, and Dr. Fauci obviously did not consent to that ad. And he was very upset and ensured that his frustration was known through the airwaves, through the media. And then Trump fires back. There seems to be a tit for tat, like there is with every kind of other individual that he ends up in a squabble with. But this is interesting because it's not like he's the former head of the CDC. You know, it's not like Trump fired him and now the gloves are off. He's the current head of the Center of Disease Control, and he's taking a stand against the president in terms of how he's conducting himself as it relates to the virus, having large rallies. Dr. Fauci was asked, "Do you think this is a mistake?" Now, Dr. Fauci didn't say Trump should not have rallies, but he said, "I think that was a recipe for disaster." You know. But what's interesting is that the Trump campaign's national press secretary defended the president's remarks on Twitter by saying, you know, Fauci and I'm sorry, not on Twitter, but in a campaign stunt, Fauci and the other idiots are trying to only talk about COVID-19 and scare people. She defended the comment by saying that there's competing science about the virus. Hogan Gidley was asked if he thought it was a good idea to call Anthony Fauci an idiot. And he replied that Dr. Fauci isn't the only doctor out there. So, this seems to be conflicting with, what we've been the person that America has come to listen to as it pertains to COVID-19 advice. This offers conflicting messages. The idea of competing science itself, I think, is a dangerous one. But I want to get your thoughts. And also, being that this is a political show, the political implications that this would have, Nefsali.
Again, I can't stress this enough. We're playing a dangerous game. Like, Dr. Fauci is the director of the CDC. That's what he was appointed to do, to give Americans the science. And so to completely contradict what he's saying, it's like, well, then what exactly, like, why is he in his position if we're going to contradict everything he's saying? Like, who should I believe at this point? Why is he not out? He's currently still the sitting CDC director. It's just, I get so frustrated when I talk about these things, and when we dialogue about it, and not in a way that I don't want to talk about it, but in a way that it's just like this administration has kind of placed a target on anyone who doesn't want to align with their ideologies. And we see that happening in real time, even with the mask being politicized, like the mask. So it's just like there's a lot of I'm going to use the word again, inconsistency. We have the director of the CDC, and we're having the president telling us not to listen to the director of the CDC. It's like, it's just too many conflicting ideas.
No, and I echo that. It's saddening because, like I said, why, if he is doing conflicting views with the president, why is he still in that position? Why is he still there? I believe what he's saying is true. Clearly, the administration does not agree with what he's saying, which is why they're doing these false claims. The campaign ad was just disrespectful, in my point. Idiots, call me he's a nice guy, but he's 500 years old. Like, isn't Trump older than him? I don't know how the whole dynamics work. So it's saddening because, like I said, we're tired of these two grown old men just keep bickering back and forth on Twitter, on TV ads, marketing. It's like a game, but people are dying, from the pandemic, from both pandemics, like we mentioned before. And the fact that Trump said also that people are tired of COVID, like, what do you mean people are tired of COVID? People are still dying from COVID. And his whole response when he, received the virus and saying, it wasn't that bad. Granted, he was in the best hospital with the best surgeons, the best medical personnel that the average American cannot afford, nor even contrict to what that means. It's just saddening. It's, once again, just conflicting views. It's, my biggest thing is if the director of the CDC is so wrong, baseless claims, why does he still have that position? Why he's not removed them? He's not removed because it's just like he said, she said, but he said has scientific evidence about his thing and been doing it since the 80s. He's been director for not the CDC, but in his field since the 80s at least. So for being politicized, it will have, once again, another negative implication of who, wear a mask, Republican, don't wear a mask, Democrat. You believe in the CDC, you're on one side, you believe in Trump, you're on the other side. End of the day, people are still dying. And that's the saddening part, that this is a human issue. It's not Dems versus Republicans, blue versus red. This is a human issue, and people are dying still from this virus. And we're trying to open back up the economy with phase 2, phase 3. And it's not working. It's not, because people are still being exposed to this, no matter, because, once again, the leader of the country is not taking it as seriously as the people who are dying from it, which is the saddest part of it all. Even during the first debate, talking about the mask issue, I had to skip that part. Kyle, I can't keep watching this because it was just so, like I said, just no motion. You're talking like this virus has not consumed 8 million American lives already, just in America. I don't know the number is globally now. It's saddening. So
You know, that's a good point you raised about, you know, why doesn't he fire the head of the CDC? I think, in my view, if he knows that that would be an act of political suicide, because Americans right now are looking for stability, and right now, Dr. Fauci, I think, rose to national prominence because he was someone that folks can look to and come to for guidance, you know, and listen to as to what to expect in the progression of this virus, what kind of necessary precautions to take. How can we go about living our daily lives in the age of social distancing, in the age of making sure that everything is restricted and 6 feet apart? I think removing Fauci, especially days before this election, would have dire consequences, I think, for the Trump campaign. But I want to transition a little bit to, unless anyone else has any thoughts on the topic, to presidential polls. You know, the race is looking really tight, and especially in key battleground states that Trump had picked up, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, states that did not go red Republican until since 1988. In Florida, 29 electoral votes are up for grabs. This seems like the key state that it'll all come down to. In addition to the Midwest, Florida looks like it's remaining in its prominent position of being a really key state that you're gonna have to stay up all night for. 49.5% is Biden's number. 46.8% is where Trump is. This is a plus 0.2 points percentage increase for the Joe Biden campaign since October 20th. In Pennsylvania, 20 electoral votes are up for grabs. Biden is at 49.9%, Trump 44.8%. Ohio, 18 electoral votes, Trump 48.4%. Trump is up by just a hair. Biden 46.5%. Michigan, Biden's at 50.5%. Trump 42.6%. Biden's seeming to have a comfortable lead up there. And Arizona, where Mark Kelly is running against the incumbent senator, who's a Republican, who's appointed by the governor. Biden is up 48.4% to Trump 45.4%. And you know, and I'm bringing these polls out for a reason, and the reason is are there factors that these polls are not considering, you know, that could produce a second Trump term? Now, I've had Professor Alan Lichtman on a few days ago, and he walked us through his 13 keys as to how he makes his predictions. And according to him, none of the noise matters. The debates don't matter. What the pundits say in terms of how things will play into the election does not matter. What matters are 13 keys that pertain to the economy, the state of the union, foreign policy. He has other keys. But I want to get your thoughts, panelists, as to whether you think there are some kinds of factors that pollsters are ignoring right now. Is there a secret Trump vote out there? Nefsli?
Oh, I'll let one of my colleagues go before I do.
Okay.
Respond.
No, go ahead.
I think there's always a secret Trump vote. I mean, look at the man. I think a lot of people aren't proud to vote for him necessarily. They won't tell you that they're going to vote for him, but there is definitely a secret Trump vote. With the polls, I think it's a lot different than 2016. In 2016, they had Hillary up here, and I think a lot of people took that like, okay, Trump isn't going to win. It's not going to happen. No way. The polls say so, you know. I think what's different in 2020 is we're a little bit more informed with the polls. People are actually voting early in bigger numbers, stronger numbers than ever before. So I'm not so concerned about the secret Trump vote, but I think it's definitely a factor that we should be aware of. I think come election day, there is going to be some tricky states to get, because of course, you know, I think a lot of conservative leaning people, they might actually go to the polls to vote. So that's something that we need to be aware of. Yeah, so that's just my thoughts on it. I think the polls are a little bit more accurate this time around, but it's always factors that you don't know. Thank you.
And what's interesting, before you jump in, Edward, is that I had two young guys who they have YouTube channels, both of them, and all they do is polling every day. and they play out different scenarios, no matter how silly it is. And what they had said on the program a few weeks back was that you could actually have a situation where come election night, the entire map or most of the map looks very red because those reflect the in-person votes. And those who are voting in person typically this year seem to be Republican. Now, of course, reports came out that, maybe Democrats have something to fear where it comes down to Republican registration rates actually experiencing an increase during that hibernation period when Democrats were abiding by COVID-19 regulations and ensuring that there was social distancing and not being out in the field operations. But, when you look at the situation that Noah indicated where people are more seemingly awake than last time, and there's such a heavy focus this year on pop culture. President Obama recently took to the stump, and he encouraged people to vote early. During the Democratic National Convention, which was virtual, there's a heavy focus on voting early, voting by mail. There are ads out there, nonpartisan ads that encourage folks to vote early by mail. You go on YouTube, you can't escape it. They say vote early by mail before you can see your video. Will these factors have any kind of influence or impact on the voter turnout that we did not see in 2016, in your opinion?
Oh, was that to anybody?
Oh, I'm sorry. Initially, I'm sorry.
Oh, I think that like what you said earlier, like the secret voter, I think that I think Noah hit it spot on. I think people are more aware, people are more informed, people are going out and voting by droves now because I think there's more at stake. I remember election night 2016, hearing that, Harambe was on the election ballot, like people were taking it as a joke because we couldn't conceive a world where Donald Trump was president. Now we've lived through it. And so I think people are aware of what happens when you don't go out to the polls, when you don't take this seriously. And we've lived through 4 years of what I would think would be some of our dark times with COVID-19, with George Floyd, with a lot of racial tension in America. I think that has woken a lot of young people up, that has woken up a lot of conservatives, so the other spectrum, that's woken up a lot of other people as well. So I don't think that there's going to be a secret Trump card to be pulled out. I think that now people are just more aware and hypersensitive to the country's climate and wanting to make sure that their vote counts.
Justine, your thoughts?
Can I actually, can we circle around and actually come back?
You're right.
Sorry.
President Obama. Go ahead.
No, in regards to the factors, I think there's two issues being at play here. One, the secret Trump vote to me is by his language. What did he say? He said, if you don't vote for me, you won't get a second stimulus package. So people are very money heavy, which unfortunately a lot of American people are. They said that $1,200 I got back in March, April, May, that helped me up to some degree. And so if I just had to vote for Trump to get another $1,200 or $1,800, to me, once again, not a secret vote, but that is the language saying, I'll give you more money, you vote for me. And for someone who just doesn't care about politics or the way the country is, they just care about their pockets, they're going to vote for that and say, oh, Trump, he did it. I mean, I never got stimulus package before in the last 25, 35 years. Let me go do it again, get an extra $1,200 to $1,800 depending on the amount. And the second thing is, which is very dangerous, is now these, like you said, the Harambe, someone put that in 2016, but now these other celebrities who are saying they're running for president, aka Kanye West, who are now maybe stealing the vote from the Democratic Party. So you won't even go to Trump. It will just go to another candidate just because, call it non-informed political people, call it lay people, call it what have you. They say, I'm just going to vote for Kanye for president, which take away votes from Trump and from Biden. But once again, probably will harm Biden more than Trump just based on the dynamics of what's going on. And so I think those two, once again, it's not a secret Trump vote. It's a money issue, and celebrities or social influencers who's saying, I can run for president because I have a platform. And so you just give me, 100,000 votes, that will take away votes from the other parties who could be a detrimental effect in the election overall. So I just want to jump in and say those 2 points.
I actually agree more with Neftali's point in that people have lived through it. And so I think a third party candidate would have had a better shot, far better shot in 2016 than this year, because I think the people who are voting have to be very intentional this year. If you're going out in person, even, you have to be intentional in making sure that you're abiding by the precautions so you yourself don't contact any or come into close contact with anybody who potentially has this virus. If you're voting by mail, you have to go out and request it. Then it gets sent to you, fill out the ballot, and then mail it back. All of those things I think are a part of a process that requires people who are intentional to make their voices heard. I think in 2016, when there was far less, things were normal. We were not dealing with a global pandemic. We had a fairly strong economy, and the job rates were on the rise. And President Obama on the stump trail, on the campaign trail yesterday, he had indicated that, if we're going to be looking at the economy and getting credit for that, you should also get credit for ignoring the pandemic. He specifically said President Trump wants credit for the economy, and he inherited, but he wants to push off and try to deflect on the pandemic he ignored. How does that message play out to voters, specifically in this era where people are looking for relief? We've talked about the COVID-19 package, but I think people are looking for political relief as well. We're looking for someone who can be steady behind the wheel. We're going through some turbulence right now, and I think folks are hungry for some kind of stability. Corey, your thoughts?
I agree. I think people are eager for stability and eager for peace. I think really as humans, that's what we all crave most deeply is peace. And what's so troubling is that I know on both sides of the spectrum, it seems that no matter who wins, there won't be peace. And that ultimately is the issue in this election cycle. And I'm hoping maybe 2024 will bring us slightly more even-keeled candidates that aren't quite as polarizing. But I think my learned colleagues have kind of hit the nail on the head. People are more engaged this voting season. They are at least making their voices heard. And I think that's impactful. I do think, though, a lot of it's noise. Like your guest last week mentioned, a lot of what celebrities are saying, even President Obama, whom I know we all deeply respect, it's noise. We've all decided who we're going to vote for. I can't name one person that I know who hasn't already decided who they're voting for president. And so I think we're at the point where everything maybe from October 1st on really doesn't matter. We're at a point where people have said, okay, I see how President Trump is behind the wheel. I know the endorsements that Vice President Biden and Senator Harris have, and I'm going to go and make my voice heard. I think what's most disappointing this election cycle, though, is ultimately, I don't really care who's president because for me, Jesus is king. So that's what matters. But at the end of the day, it doesn't feel like there will be peace. Whether we have a President Biden or a President Trump, it seems like no one will be happy. And so I think that's kind of where we're at this election cycle, just to kind of put the dot on it.
Yeah. And, Edward, I not to underscore the point you made, but I mean, to mitigate the point you made, but, to your point, Larry Hogan wrote in Ronald Reagan, who has been dead since 2004, on his ballot. And it makes me, I was wondering, why would you do something like that when the stakes seem to be so high? Just making a statement for the sake of making a statement. Why waste your vote? Why waste your time? In my view, as it pertains to who's on the ballot for president, Ronald Reagan will not be resurrected to take a non-consecutive term as president of the United States. But, I think that was reflective of a lot of folks' frustration. They may not be satisfied with either side. But I think the big question this year is, will that be enough to have a reduction in the voter turnout. Noah, your thoughts?
This election cycle, no. I mean, to Corey's point, she was saying that she doesn't think like after October 1st matters, but I believe it does. There's a lot of people who I've talked to who I wouldn't say they don't know or they're undecided about who they're voting for. They're still not engaged in the political process. Probably haven't voted since they turned 18. So there's still people to be grabbed on both sides of the aisle, whether it's the conservatives or the liberals trying to grab people. So I don't think so much with, I see people writing in Kanye West and like you said, Ronald Reagan. I don't think so much of that is going to happen this time. I think this time around, people are going to come to a decision. They're not going to be voting for the Green Party or anything. It's going to come down to Trump or Biden. And yeah, I don't think it's going to be too much distraction as last time. Thank you.
So, yeah. And so I want to throw out, what kind of Senate races are you guys focusing on? Because all the way down, when you look across the country, each of the Senate races seem to be very hotly contested. 538 released polls between October 21st and 22nd that show that Gary Peters in Michigan is at 52% against John James, a young African-American Republican, who's at 43%. And this is interesting because Gary Peters wrote an op-ed pertaining to his experience with abortion and his wife having a miscarriage and her life actually being on the line as a result of them almost not being able to get a proper abortion. Amy McGrath against Mitch McConnell, they had an interesting debate. There was even a moment in the debate when Mitch McConnell turned to the moderator when given an opportunity and said, just go to the next question. And I thought that really showed that he felt like he had this race in the bag. He did not have to answer a question as it pertains to COVID-19 relief aid. He did not have to answer a question as it related to the nomination process of Judge Amy Coney Barrett, because he felt as if his position was secure. Even if he's not the majority leader, he's not going to be demoted as senator. At least that was the impression I got. When you look at even North Carolina, when recent revelations revealed that Cal Cunningham was involved with what seems to be an affair, but it's through text messaging. I don't think any pictures were sent, but messages, words back and forth between an army or a military serviceman's wife and himself. But at the same time, it doesn't seem to have had any effect, or at least a damaging effect, because it seems like he's still up 48% to Tom Tillis at 42%. And I think,
Well, Mike, to your point, in North Carolina, I will say he was up double digits in the polls. And after that whole scandal, it came down to single digits. So I think that's very telling. I just want to mention that.
No, not to underscore, the effect it has on the electorate. But I think that the main focus is solely getting out of this COVID-19 pandemic. And ensuring that the death rates are reduced, ensuring that the cases decline, and ensuring that we have leadership that provides a national approach to this pandemic. And I think because, when people go outside, the first thing you have to do is put on a mask. You're not worrying about Tom Tillis's, affair. I think in a normal election, it would have had a more damaging effect, if things were more normal. But, I want to get your thoughts as it pertains to these exciting Senate races. Mark Kelly in Arizona, 48%. Martha McSally's at 44%. Now, Virginia is interesting because Warner seems to be comfortably ahead at 57%, and his challenger Gate is only at 39%. What Senate races are you guys looking at? Do you think that the Senate can flip blue, or do you think it could narrowly remain comfortable in Republican hands, Justine?
So that's an interesting question. There are a lot of North Carolina ties on the panel, it seems, but my parents also live in North Carolina, so that's where I am currently. It's where I voted as well. And it's definitely been a really interesting Senate race to watch in terms of Paul Cunningham and Tom Tillis. I definitely feel like when it comes to the Senate, I think Neftali mentioned this earlier, and I think Corey also echoed this, but I think because the Republicans are currently sitting in the Senate and they have the majority, and currently so many people are suffering, they will kind of take the brunt of that. And I think that will also affect the Senate races. It doesn't look like it's affecting Senator McConnell as much as we would think, or some of us would hope. But I definitely feel like there are a lot of other key seats in South Carolina, in North Carolina, in Michigan, where there could potentially be a flip. And it may be enough of a flip where the Dems are able to get the Senate majority and there might be a possible change of leadership. So there are definitely a couple that I'm looking out for, but especially North Carolina because I live here currently.
And that's a really good point. I'm also, North Carolina is home for me. But President Obama on the stump said, you're not going to expect to see just one change by voting for Biden and Harris. You got to vote down the ticket. That's what he encourages folks to do. Now, he has received criticism because Obama does not have a good track record as it relates to getting folks on his coattails to victory. When we're looking at the midterm elections in 2014 and the midterm election in 2010, those were not good years for Democrats. And even in 2016, when he was campaigning hard for Hillary Clinton to succeed him in the presidency, we knew that ultimately didn't result in success. But, do you think that President Obama can have a positive impact on, how these Senate races play out? Neftali?
Honestly, I think that President Obama's voice is necessary. I would say that I think it's a necessary voice. I think people do want to hear what President Obama has to say. I think that whether or not it helps any Democratic senators, I'm not too sure. One thing that I was thinking about throughout this whole conversation was I remember joining a protest, and one of the things that the head of the protester kept saying is vote for your local people, vote, like go out there and vote. And so I think that kind of like what I mentioned earlier, I think people are more aware of who is in office. I think that there's more awareness now. But as for President Obama and whether or not him like endorsing any Democratic senator or just encouraging other people to vote, I don't know if that's going to have such a huge impact, but I do think it's necessary. But I don't know what the impact looks like.
To add to that, Mike, I think former President Obama and ironically the woman dealing governor in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, they are big influencers in Georgia. I know the Democratic race is increasing a lot over the last couple of days. I know also the challenger to Purdue has gained a lot of traction in the last week and a half, 2 weeks because of Obama and Abrams' voice in that saying about get out there to vote. Early voting just began opening on Tuesday in Georgia until the election, of course. And so I think, I guess it depends on the state. Like I said, I know in Georgia, Obama's voice and Abrams have been a big influencer in that area. So maybe it's a state-by-state case about if Obama's gravitational pull to this day is still, making younger voters and voters in general go out there and vote down the ticket. Like not just for the president, but for everybody on the.
I have to confess that South Carolina is my favorite Senate race to watch. Lindsey Graham versus Jamie Harrison to me is so exciting. The debate. Jamie Harrison really brought it, I thought. And Lindsey Graham, and I think he was reflective of a lot of what the Republicans are doing. They're portraying it as it's either me or a radical left. It's either me or a radical left agenda. It's either me or socialism. And Jamie Harrison's like, talk about South Carolina issues. It was so interesting because, when you nationalize the race, at least from what I've seen, it's not good for Democrats. When you bring in celebrity appearances, when you make this about what this can do for across the country as opposed to focusing solely on issues of the state, I think that damages Democrats. But in this case, Jamie Harrison, I think, understands that, and he's crafted a campaign that's narrowly tailored to address what it is that South Carolinians want from a senator. And I think that, you know, him challenging Lindsey Graham and saying, just be a man and stand by your word. I think it was less about what it was about, which was the confirmation process, and more of, you know, values that folks in the South have, you know, honesty, integrity, standing by your word, white or black or whatever. If you challenge someone and say you were not standing by your word, that's highly offensive, I think, in the South. And I think that's effective as a campaign tactic. But that's just me. I'm interested to see how that plays out. But Corey, do you have any kind of Senate races that you're interested in North Carolina or outside of North Carolina?
I am incredibly interested in North Carolina. I have been closely following the Cal Cunningham, Tom Tillis debate. As I said, I lean conservative, and if you look at my resume, you'll see I've worked for conservative elected officials. But Cal Cunningham almost got my vote, honestly, until the scandal happened. And so I am watching that very closely to kind of see what happens. I think Cunningham has a good shot. His advertisements are persuasive and fact-based, and I think that is what wins. Like you mentioned with Lindsey, the Lindsey Graham race, and even with Mitch McConnell, hopefully, I think they should be held to their word. I'm also watching Virginia, although I agree with you. I think Mark Warner's probably locked it up. He's been a very present face in Virginia. Sorry if I said North Carolina. In Virginia, he's been a very present face for many years. I hail from that great Commonwealth, so I watch that race closely. But of course, watching Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham as well, just trying to kind of see if they will be unseated and whether the Senate will ultimately flip. I think to answer that previous question, I think there is a very good chance that it will, because despite President Trump's previously being able to very strongly carry people on his coattails, I don't know that this time that will be the case, especially with such strong Democratic candidates saying, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire this time.
So I want to ask this last question of the night, you know, as it pertains to the debate that is going on or about to happen tonight. President Trump has received some coaching as to how to change his tactics from the last, if you want to call it a debate, that happened a few weeks ago. So they're telling him, you know, don't save Biden, yield the stage to him, and hopefully they're anticipating that he ties himself up, and that Trump can come on and look like the one who's the better choice of the two. There's also talk of him bringing more jokes to the debate. Is this enough to soften his image? And is this enough to try to turn the narrative a little bit in his corner? I mean, in his direction, as we're entering the final days of the campaign, 12 days to go. And, you know, I just want to put a plug in again. The guest I had recently said debates really don't make or break anything. They're great for informing viewers and the citizenry of what their candidates propose and where they stand on the issues, but they don't really have a determining factor. Do you think this could have, or this change in tone for Trump could have any kind of positive effect? I'm going to throw the question out. Anyone can jump in.
Yeah, I guess he's been coached. I would be surprised to see if there was a change in tone tonight with the debate. As I understand right now, they are muting mics when the other candidate is talking, so maybe that could help with the coaching, but I don't think, I just don't see how the president will behave differently tonight. I mean, I guess we'll see. I'm not going to believe it till I see it. So, yeah.
I think there's an old adage for good reason. You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, and for me, two things. I think kind of what Corey hinted at earlier. I think people are already sure who they're going to vote for. I think this is just an informative conversation, debate now. I think this is just going to give people more light on what each candidate has to say. But I think that people are more so now more aware of who they're going to vote for. So I think this is just more of an informative debate. Kind of to what Noah was saying, this is my second point. I think that for those who are grappling with who they're going to vote for, I think that this will shed some more light. I think this whole debate is more informative than a debate for people to figure out who they're going to vote for.
And to add to that as well, it's hard to coach ego and pride. And so once that debate gets emotional and logic goes out the window, the president gonna do what he always does. His pride and ego is gonna kick in, and he's gonna raise his voice and starts mumbling, starts pointing, and starts, deflecting or dodging questions and making disrespectful jokes, talking about probably Biden's children again. He's going to say once again, it probably worked the first 7 minutes, and after that, once Biden says something that Trump does not agree with about his policy, about him as a man, about him as a president, about the last 4 years, that's when that pride and ego is going to kick in, and then we're going to go back once again to watching a comedy show, and I want to see if I'm going to watch the whole thing or not.
And here's the thing, Biden can't respond to everything. I think people need to realize he can't respond to everything Trump is going to dish his way. He can't, because if you do that, your message gets lost. You're not spending time on on the plans that you want people to hear. He can, I guess, to your point, Edward, he can nip things in the bud, I think, on certain points, but he cannot yield all of his time or the majority of his time to getting into the tit for tat debacle Trump wants. I think Trump wants this so that he controls the narrative. He controls the debate. The same way he tried to control the debate with his dominance and overpowering Biden's voice. And Noah, you raised an important point about this debate. The mics will be muted. I'm thinking that the mics will mute, but Trump will still talk, But the interesting thing is that Biden's voice will be louder by default because his mic would be on. But I'm wondering, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Corey, do you have any thoughts on this?
I stand by what I said. You can't teach old dogs new tricks. And even for historically conservative voters like myself, things like that are turnoffs. To see someone disrespect a candidate, because every person is worthy of that. And I think especially a former vice president is worthy of the respect that his office and his candidacy has earned him. He's worthy and deserving of having that time. And so, of course, if I were on the Trump campaign, I would encourage him, just use your inside voice, try to be quiet, treat others like you want to be treated. But I think it's true. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. And so I think you astutely pointed out, he probably will continue to talk. But honestly, I think some of the voter base likes that. It's not me. But I'm sure there are people that like that. And that's honestly who he's catering to. So I think that he's kind of found his niche, if you will.
I'm excited. Less than 30 minutes away. This debate is about to start. But I want to thank each of the panelists for, just being a part of this dynamic conversation tonight. I really appreciated this conversation. This robust exchange of ideas, I think, was something that I'll always remember. I just want to thank the viewers again for tuning in for the 16th week. Thank you so much for being a part of this project. As we're getting closer to Election Day, I just want to go ahead and ask each of you if you can briefly just explain to folks why it is that they need to take this election seriously. I've seen even now, this past week, I've seen folks saying all kinds of nonsense on my social media feed as it relates to the two candidates, things that aren't true. Let me not say the two candidates as it pertains to Biden. I'm going to be blunt. All of these different conspiracies that we're seeing, and that coupled with the fact that you have people on the outside, Iran and Russia, who are trying to infiltrate this election again, trying to use social media to cause tensions and cause fights on social media and to cause doubt and to spread conspiracy and alternative facts. What is your message to someone as to why they need to cut through the noise and take this election seriously, and why this election is so much different than previous elections? I'm going to start off with Neftali.
My advice would just be simple, because your quality of life depends on it.
Edward?
I mean, she took the words out of my mouth. It matters because you're a human being and you live in the country where you want to be treated as a human being with peace of mind, peace of freedom to express yourself the way you want to without being hated, humiliated, embarrassed, or infiltrated by your personal avenues of your life. It's important, like I said, to vote in every election, especially this election, because the next 4, 8, 10, 12 years will be impactful. We're literally dealing with a global pandemic that, studies, the survey research has shown that it won't end until probably middle of summer, fall 2021. And so whoever's the leadership at that time will direct about how far this pandemic will go or will not, in as far as vaccines, distribution, other, second, third, fourth stimulus package. And so it matters. It's money in your pocket. It's how you're going to go to school. We see schools opening back up and how it's affecting the children, the parents, the teachers, the principals, the superintendents. It's a mess. Even in different fields, law school, med school, business school, being virtual learning, the healthcare profession, and how they're dealing with everything going on. It's this pandemic, this election, even the racial injustice that's going on the past 400 years, but especially this year, that's been more advertised in a way to show that this election has a lot of things that could affect your livelihood, and it does affect you. Your vote does matter. Even if you don't think it doesn't, just get out there and vote. Early voting, your preference in person or mail-in. I'm going to drive to Georgia and do it in person, just to make sure that there's no foolishness going on, because we all know about Georgia and how they react to certain election results. And so I want to make sure that I'm in person. My name, there's a camera showing that Edward Foltz has voted in the state of Georgia for the 2020 election. So, yeah.
Thank you, Edward. Noah?
Oh, I would just say I agree with everything that was said. I'll just keep it short and concise. But hey, I'm always saying that you can't really complain if you're not voting, and that goes all the way up to the president, to your local elections. I know there's a lot of stuff on the ballot for my state and my city that's locally that I'm going to be voting for. So I would just encourage everybody to do that. It's just important. I think a lot of people don't see that impact it has on you until there's a policy that comes knocking at your door. So yeah, don't complain if you don't vote. And that's just my thoughts on that. And I'm encouraging everyone to vote, of course. I know there's people that say, no, I don't like this candidate. This candidate was my pick. But I mean, it's time to grow up and put your big girl. What I'll say. Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. Justine?
Definitely to echo everything that everybody's already said. I think there's so much at stake. And so I would encourage an individual to vote, especially because not voting, you're still kind of making a decision to some degree. You're just kind of not really being engaged in that process. So you don't really get to escape the implications or what happens by not voting. So I essentially would say to be as informed as possible. I think there was an analogy a while back that like voting is not the same as marrying somebody. You don't have to love everything about them, but definitely be informed about the policies that are at stake and look for the person or the people who you agree or you're most in line with and try to let your voice be heard.
That leaves me. I would encourage everyone to vote because your vote is your voice and it's the way that you are heard in the American political system. So many men and women have died and fought for your right to vote. And I know all of us on this panel have at some point had to be given the right to vote. And so it's so important that you exercise that right that has been constitutionally given to you. And I would encourage everyone to become educated, and regardless of whether you agree with your friends or you agree with how your family votes, just know everyone's trying to do their best and trying to make sure that the country reflects a peaceful and healthy world for all of us. So just vote in line with who you believe will affect those ideals.
Thank you, each of you. And I just want to go ahead and put a plug in and say, elections have consequences, and we're seeing what those consequences are in such a tangible way in this pandemic. This pandemic You can't blame Trump for the pandemic. You can't blame Republicans in the Senate for the pandemic. You can't blame Democrats in the House for the pandemic, but you can blame parties or political leaders who ignored scientific experts, who ignored the head of their nonpartisan heads of agencies that are dedicated to ensuring the health and well-being of the American people. You could blame that. And I think, President Obama had indicated yesterday, you can't focus on voting for one time and expecting everything to be fine once you cast that vote. You're not voting for this candidate so that everything could be fine. And you're throwing all of your cares and concerns on one candidate, and you're expecting that person to fulfill everything. You vote in 2020, you vote in 2022 in the midterms, you vote in 2024 during another presidential election, and you vote constantly to try to get yourself gradually to the place you want to be. And, I think, Justine, you had indicated, voting is not a marriage. And a lot of times people are looking for the one when it comes down to presidential candidates. There is no the one. It's a destination. You get on the bus, you may not like the way it smells. You may not like, how it looks, but you get on it because it's going to get you closer to where you need to be. And I think that's how we have to approach this whole process. With that being said, I just want to thank each of you for joining this panel tonight. This was an amazing discussion. I really appreciate each of your insight. This was a diverse exchange of ideas, and that's really what I appreciated. Please tune in on Sunday at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. I will be joined with former Texas Congressman and former 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke, and we'll be talking about Democratic politics in the state of Texas and much more. I hope that you'll tune in, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you all for tuning in again for the 16th edition of the Political Mic. Make sure that you watch tonight's debate. Stay informed. Please stay away from all the noise and the fake news and the fake articles and the fake bots, and vote.